Okay, I have something of a confession to make. Ooh. Um. Yeah. Confession. Shut up. Okay, I'm gonna come right out and say it. I really didn't like the book. Yes! I know! Yes, I know. Ready Player One is a very beloved book in a lot of circles, and I can appreciate that. But you know what? Seeing as I appreciate your opinion on the matter, won't you at least indulge me in telling you why I feel the way I do? Word got to me about this book. Everyone's saying, oh man, you're gonna love it because they have like all these references to things, and the story's really cool. It feels steeped in our generation. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. I finally found the book at an airport on my trip out to Vegas with Lynn. Lynn plowed through it within a day. She told me the synopsis, and I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. And so I finally started dipping into it, and it's had promise. In the beginning, I was really digging the world that was being built around it. I loved the whole Willy Wonka-esque race to get the big prize. I thought that was a really cool angle. But there were things that were happening in the book that were getting wearying on my nerves and basically wore me down halfway through to the point where I was kind of getting tired of it. The book was becoming tedious. And then the final resolution was severely underwhelming, particularly with the themes that the book was shooting for. Okay, so before I move on any further, let's get into the synopsis. The story is set in this dystopian future a few decades from now. We are severely overpopulated, and amongst the overpopulation, a lot of us are impoverished. The poverty levels are through the roof, and a lot of people are forced to live in compounds composed of caravans stacked on top of each other, very appropriately dubbed the Stacks. And in order to cope with this harsh reality, a lot of the impoverished have to find refuge in this virtual reality called the Oasis. Now, the Oasis was created by an enigmatic introvert named James Halliday, and the world was designed to allow people to connect by proxy from various points of the world and escape the harshness of reality. The Oasis became a lifestyle, actually became a substitution for actual life, and it became the biggest commodity in the world. But in time, James Halliday passed away. Halliday left an Easter egg, and whoever found this Easter egg would be bequeathed the entirety of Halliday's estate, and that would include the Oasis. Control the Oasis, control the world. The only hitch is this Easter egg is buried deep. This is where we meet the main character, Wade Watts, who is pretty much as low as you can go in this place. He has a very harsh family life, and he has his own little hiding place where he buries himself deep in the Oasis and the whole history of James Halliday in his own efforts to try and find this egg. Well, he ends up getting a step above the rest when he ends up interpreting one of his clues and actually finds the first leg in this contest. But unfortunately, when you're the top of the heap, there's going to be a bunch of people clawing to bring you down. I was really into the story concept. I was very much into the world that was being created. I love the dystopian idea. And one of my principal fears for society is that we all wind up kind of getting lost in our own digital domain, that we wind up thinking that the only way to connect with each other is through a video screen. Don't read into this. Don't read into that. If you want to meet me in real life. I'll be at cons. But one of my principal fears has always been the idea that people will become so buried in their own digital realm that they'll forget that human connection cannot be gained that way. That true human connection has to be met when we're all outside, meeting each other, interacting in the physical. With the closure of many beloved chains, particularly ones that kicked off in the 80s, some even older, a lot of electronic retail stores, Circuit City, even Best Buy's kind of collapsing. And now we just lost Toys R Us. The thing that terrifies me is that we might end up leading to this reality. And this book actually made me go, yes, there's someone who gets it. There's someone who realizes that this is not the way life should be lived. And then, I get that this is a book that's very deeply rooted in its geeky connotations. That's totally fine. And given the context of James Halliday, his lifestyle, and the way he engineered the Oasis, I get that there's going to be the inevitability of a crap ton of geek references. I am all about geek references. I'm surrounded by geek references. That's fine. The thing that was driving me crazy about them, though, is that about 70% of them, Ernest Cline takes about a half page to about 2 pages to explain the reference. This ticks me off royally because the people who are going to jump at this book, the people who have been flocking to this book, the people who are begging me to read this book, are the kind of people who are going to get these references. I was reading this book and I was going, I know that. I know that. I know that. It was redundant as hell, and I guarantee if you chopped out all the explanations for the references, the book would be yay thin. Perhaps maybe the publisher was like saying, maybe we should explain these references here. That's entirely possible. And please, Ernest Cline, if you are watching, please leave in the comment section. I would love to know if this is the case. You are forgiven. That's great. But if he thought that it was necessary to explain all these references, that tells me that he doesn't think that the audiences, the people who are going to read this book, who are going to go out of their way to read this book because of all the geeky connotations, that tells me that you are not giving us the credit for intelligence. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Anthony Burgess, when he wrote A Clockwork Orange, now for anyone who has ever read A Clockwork Orange, about 50% of that book is in NADSAT slang. Anthony Burgess created an entire slang glossary, which is found in the back of the book. But in this book, which is written from the point of view of a juvenile delinquent in the future who, for him, this slang is commonplace, and the people he's talking to, as he narrates, he's going to assume that these people know what this slang is. So he's just going to say it. He's not going to bother explaining what each and every NADSAT slang is going to mean. Anthony Burgess said, this is the world. This is the way they communicate. They're not going to explain everything they say. If you want to know what these translations mean, I left you a glossary in the back. Just refer to that. So in appliance to what Ernest Cline should have done, he should have just left the references and ran with it. We live in the age of Google. If you don't get the reference, oh, okay, move on. You gotta trust your reader. And frankly, I felt that I was being talked down to the way this book was written, and it was kind of insulting after going through about 100 plus pages of that. Okay, like I said, the major thing that really attracted me to the book was the intense satirical angle about how people are obsessed with human connection by proxy, via computer screens, via the internet, and not actually thinking that maybe they should start connecting in real life. And the thing is, the book actually did touch upon that. And I will say, my favorite character in the book was Artemis, specifically because she got it, she understood. And my favorite part in the book is when Parzival, Wade, who on the Oasis is named Parzival, confesses his love for her, and she says, no, you don't know me. It's so easy to fall in love with this avatar of me because that is my idealized version of me, and that is clearly the idealized version of me that you want to believe is real. I am a different person in the real world, and I don't trust the fact that if you meet me, you're gonna feel that way. Yes! Yes! I gotta give credit to Wade. Inevitably, when he does meet Artemis, he actually looks at her going, she's beautiful. She is wonderful. I got to know her as a person, and I look at her, I see the person that I fell in love with on the Oasis, I see her here, wonderful. But the thing that honestly didn't work for me is that she pretty much fell head over heels for him as well. But here's the problem, I never actually got the vibe that Artemis was actually into him. The problem with writing a book from a person's point of view is that you're only exclusively remanded to this person's point of view. Now, if this book switched over to Artemis's point of view, then we could have gotten a bit more insight into finding out whether or not she actually had mutual feelings towards him. Then, the inevitable resolution of them getting together may have felt a bit more natural, but seeing as the book is what it is, and you don't really get to know much about Artemis's motivations towards this resolution, for all we know, this was just Ernest Cline wanting to give us a Hollywood ending. It's cliche, it's dull, and honestly, I would have been a lot more complimentary of this book if Artemis said one of two things. She either says, no, you're a friend to me, I don't see you that way. Or something that would be a little bit more pleasing to the readers, and because I just heard that he's working on a sequel, could lead into the sequel a bit more. She says, listen, I don't know how I actually feel about you in real life. I see you, you're a cool guy, but I don't know if I see you on that level yet. So can we just take baby steps? And that's cool, because a relationship needs to be built upon, and you can't build a relationship just by talking to each other on the internet. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You have to actually meet the person. You have to get to know them before you can actually decide whether or not this is a person you actually want to commit to a relationship to. It just felt rushed, and it felt absolutely forced at the very end. How many people in the history of the internet fell in love with someone because they gave you a fake picture? And then when they finally get to meet them, find out they're totally not the person you're looking at. That's what I saw at this ending, and it wasn't working for me. But there's a lot of things about this book that weren't working as well as they should. There's a competing corporation called IOI, and it's presided over by a man named Sorrento. Sorrento is a boring-ass villain. He's essentially the mouthpiece to IOI. And frankly, it would have been more interesting if there was no mouthpiece and that IOI was just this faceless entity. It would have complemented the idea of corporations being the big enemy if this corporation was like this big black storm that just loomed over everybody. It would have been terrifying. And the idea that this corporation has this kind of godlike ability to attack people in the physical world as opposed to just the Oasis, it would have been terrifying. That the idea that Wade is facing off against this giant, but because they personify all the things that IOI is trying to achieve via Sorrento, it made the villain dull. And it makes me sad because I see where the threat is coming from. In fact, we are suffering from it right now with the collapse of net neutrality and the worry that corporations are going to force us to pay for services which only just prior had been free. The scary part is those parts of Ready Player One are kind of coming true in real life. That would have been incredible had they stuck to the idea of IOI just being this formless, shapeless, almost like the Nothing in Neverending Story. That would have been wicked. It would have been much more intimidating. But instead, they decide to funnel it all through a typical, I'm a businessman, I am the evil man because I carry a briefcase and wear a snazzy suit that you have to pay about 5 paychecks worth in order to afford. Boring. Boring. I know that a virtual reality world is kind of the heart and soul of this story, but the thing is, when you stake your entire final climax on everything that occurs inside a virtual reality world, you tend to lose some stakes because, unfortunately, there is no physical threat to our heroes. It was predictable, it was dull, and I think a lot of it was the fact that there was no actual stakes. Honestly, this would have been made a hell of a lot better if we find out that while all this battle's going on, IOI actually sends a hit squad to attack them in the real world. That would have given it a nice escalation of the tension, to know that there's a race against time on opposing sides, in the real world and in the Oasis. Then you would have had your tension, and it would have worked. Then everything that happened in the Oasis would have been more imperative. And this leads to the final resolution. The resolution that Parzival, Wade, decides that he doesn't want to go back into the Oasis anymore, which I'm like, that's great. That's the resolution that you should come to in this book, but there's one problem. I have seen no development leading up to this point where Wade's deciding that the Oasis is wrong and that I want to be rid of it. The Oasis is an addiction in this world. This is something you don't just give up. The entire world is still technically addicted to the Oasis. They're still attached. They're still plugged in. I would have liked to have seen a gradual transition where Wade comes to the decision that he's sick of the Oasis and wants to be rid of it. And in this final resolution, now that he has acquired all the wealth, what do I do from here? Artemis has said the world needs to go beyond the Oasis. They need to be free of it. And that would have been a good kickoff for the sequel right there. The whole world doesn't have to be rid of the Oasis. It would be cool if Wade decides the world needs to get back to the way it was, and we need to gradually get people away from that. Because the Oasis is an addiction. We are addicted to this faux connectivity, and it's not healthy. Everyone's just going to be sitting in their homes thinking that they're uniting each other, when in reality, it's just one big fake illusion. The funny part is, at the end of the day, IOI is still out there, and there's still a looming threat. So I'm hoping against hope that if it's true that Ernest Cline is working on a sequel, I hope he goes beyond. But in the end, my major problem is that Wade didn't come to this a natural conclusion, that in the end he didn't want to go back into the Oasis. I was like, oh, whoa, 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 where'd this come from? You get poontang in the real life? I guess it's just because he liked sex in the real life that he didn't need it in the Oasis anymore. I'm like, where do you come to this conclusion? It has a great concept, and it's played very, very well. And it gives justification for a lot of references, even though it feels the need to explain all those references. And all the potential of the story, particularly as a sci-fi prophecy of where we could be going as a society, ends up getting thrown by the wayside just for a typical big splashy epic showdown. And what makes it even worse is that because it's in the Oasis, it's just as fake as any final climax of any Transformers movie. And I feel bad to say that because it's a good idea. It's just I hate potential being wasted. And there are even moments in this book where I thought that they were going to get to that point. There's a great moment where Wade actually has to physically infiltrate IOI. And I was like, great, can we please move forward with this? And I thought the thing that I would have loved is that the final egg turns out to be outside the Oasis. That actually would be even cooler is if that big final battle inside the Oasis is for what we thought was going to be the real egg, when Wade actually finds out that nope, it was outside the Oasis the whole time, and that Halliday knew that his creation was a disease, and that for the person who earns this egg, they would need to come to this natural revelation that the egg was outside the Oasis the whole time. That resolution would have connected everything so much more. It would have worked with Wade's transition to that final resolution that he doesn't want to be in the Oasis anymore. It would have lent to the ultimate moral of the story that we can't connect in this digital realm. And it would have been a great springboard for what may come later. I don't know. So I hope that I've elucidated, to the peak of my ability, my disdain for the book. Now, you're probably wondering, am I going to hate the movie? Am I going to be one of those guys who walks in immediately wanting to hate on the movie? Here's the wacky part. No. Funny thing is, I'm actually kind of optimistic about the movie. First major reason, Spielberg. The book is a love letter to the age of Spielberg, the age when he was innovating movies. And who better to direct this movie than the man who practically inspired the book, who laid the seeds? It's just right. And because of the man's expertise and because of the man's ability to innovate, I looked at the trailers and I was going, yes, this is the way I envisioned it. And the best part is, this is going to be one of those movies where you can't have those cynics going, oh, the CGI is so fake. All the major CGI sequences are going to be taking place in the Oasis. So it's okay if it looks a little digital because it's in a digital realm. So I'm cool with that. And I looked at all these visuals and I was like going, this is going to be wicked. And I'm intrigued to see what they're going to do with a base book. Because like I said, the book has great ideas. And much like how Game of Thrones built on what the books are doing to make an incredible TV series, and since Spielberg has had a wonderful history of turning mediocre books into amazing movies, I have a feeling Ready Player One, the movie, might actually ascend beyond the book. So I actually have a wealth of optimism about this movie. So you can definitely expect my review of the movie to come very, very soon. I'm even going to take the time to go see it in IMAX 3D because I've been hearing that's the way to see it. So you can definitely expect my review of the movie on Narcotic Casserole before the end of the week. So for more addictive content on Narcotic Casserole, simply like, share, subscribe, click. Thou shalt be served.